Happy holidays. I am really excited to read your toes, and the person who gave this to you truly loves you. And I'm really honored to do this reading. So, when I read toes, there's a few things that it's important that you're aware of. First of all, the right foot represents the way that you are in the world, externally, the way that you interact with others, and the way that people receive you. Your left foot is your internal self, the relationship you have with your soul, the relationship you have with your higher power. So, right is external, left is internal. And then each one of the toes has a specific energy that it tells us messages about. So, your toes are what are in contact with the earth. Your toes are the first messengers. What we see in the toes tells us where you've been, where you are right now in this life's journey. And then, based on where you are, it can tell where you're going, but only as a trajectory, because the direction that you're going right now indicates where the energy is flowing towards. But that's the power of toe reading, is that by knowing that, you can then make small adjustments, sometimes big adjustments, but toe reading is very gentle. I'll invite you to do some manual manipulation with your toes to help move the energy. And that is how you change the trajectory of the energy, the trajectory of the pattern, so that you can create a different outcome. So the energy of the toes, I'll be repeating this several times during the reading. And just to start off, our big toes, the great toes, on the left side is the spirit path, and on the right side is the life path. And then each of the following toes have the same energy. It's just how it presents, either externally or internally. So we have communication and expression, action, relationships, and trust and prosperity. So to put another analogy to this, your toes are speaking a language, and I interpret that language. So if you went to a different country, say you went to Korea and you don't speak Korean, you would have an interpreter interpret the language so that you could understand it. And that's what I do with the language of toes. So the first thing that I observed when I saw your toes is that you are a very adaptable and very flexible person. Sometimes to your own detriment. So adaptability and flexibility can be such a deep gift until we do it so much that we're constantly compromising ourselves, putting our own ideas, our own feelings, our own needs on the shelf while we provide to and cater to the thoughts, desires, and needs of others. And this looks like it's a very, very long pattern. You probably feel like you're the strong one. You're strong, so you, to keep the peace or to serve others or whatever it may be, consistently move along this path, adjusting yourself, adjusting your stance as you move through this journey of life, so that you are serving others, you are keeping the peace, you are constantly adapting, and you've largely put yourself on the shelf and figured you'd take care of yourself when everybody else was taken care of, or you would pursue your ideas, wants, and creative pursuits when everything else was taken care of. Or perhaps there's conversations that you've had or in your mind, but it was too scary to have them in this three-dimensional world with people. Or you knew that if you did have that conversation, or you did do that thing, or you did voice that idea, that it would create waves in your relationships. And it was easier, your perception was that it was easier to stay quiet than it was to express. Now, how do I know this? Because I'm looking here, first of all, at the very flexible nature of your toes. Very, very flexible. And I'm looking particularly at these two toes. Now, I can't see everything under the Band-Aid here, but I'd be curious to know, what was the injury that required this Band-Aid? In the world of toe reading, everything means something. Just like when you're communicating with someone, the manner in which they hold their body, their hand gestures, the tone, the set of their eyes, all of those things mean something in communication. So it's the same thing with your toes. Everything means something. It's fascinating that there was an injury to your toe right now before this toe reading. You've got a Band-Aid on that toe. And one of the major messages from your toes is it's time to express. And it's time to express for you. It's time for you to pursue your creative ideas and desires. You are a mother. And when you get older, you may not have physical children anymore, but you do have children of the mind. What children of the mind are desiring for you to nurture them, for you to grow them into something? So there's your first journaling question. What children of the mind, and that can be creative pursuits, that can be things you want to learn, that can be ideas you want to explore, new talents that you want to hone, or old talents that you want to give rebirth to. What are they? Because a lot of your life you have been expressing in a way that feels safe. And so journal about that and see what comes up in that. What do you really want to do? Excuse me. And just so you know, when I yawn or clear my throat or have some other physical response to what I'm saying, like a sneeze coming on, that is the energy already starting to move. It's already starting to move. So you've got a head start on this. So I really encourage you to take time sooner rather than later for yourself to journal about these things. So that's what your communication toe is talking about. You see it's coming up here. There's a lot of flexibility, and then it leans into your action toe. There is some blocked energy in this toe. So I would recommend gently massaging that toe, both of those toes, just a little bit to see while you're asking questions like, what are you communicating to me? And with the intention of releasing that blocked energy. So when we see the the communication expression toe leaning into the action toe, we see that prominently here on the right side. On the left side, it's almost like your action toe is moving away, and you can see that they're all leaning on this toe right here, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. And like I said, I can't see what's underneath this Band-Aid, but you do have an injury on that toe, which oftentimes, in fact, most of the time, is a message that is screaming to be heard in the way that you communicate and express, and a desire to release the blocked energy. Sometimes when something gets broken, it gets broken so it can be rebuilt. So whatever injury you have going on with that toe, it's asking for you to rewrite the energy. So this toe would be the way that you're communicating with yourself. So another journaling prompt. What are the words and the phrases that you say to yourself repeatedly internally? Pay attention to those. Messages like, I'm too much this, or too little this, or I can't do this, or I'm not smart enough, or I'm not strong enough. So just explore what some of that messaging is. I'm not perfect enough. That's one that came screaming in loud and clear. And confirmed by energy being released in my body. So there's some journaling prompts for this one. Or another one, in what ways am I not expressing my true self? And why? What are the beliefs, perceptions, and boxes that you have yourself in that lead you to believe that there are things that you cannot express verbally or otherwise? And explore those. It's showing up strongly in your feet. And if our toes are our first messengers, this is showing up somewhere in your body as well. All right, over here to the right, communication expression toe. This is the way that you communicate and express in the outside world with other people, the way people receive your expression. So my guess is based on the straightness of this action toe and the way that your communication expression toe is leaning into that, you lead with action. Action is important to you. Doing things, acts of service, staying busy. Are those things that are resonating with you? Is your value somehow tied up in how much you can get done in a day, or how many people you served in a day, or how many things you were able to tick off your to-do list? Action is extremely important to you, and you are a person of your word. If you say you're going to do something, you're going to do it. You can see that with this leading in toe. What you don't do is take action for yourself. You take action for others, and that is beautiful. What a gift. Continue to do that as it works for you. And when are you going to take action for yourself? This goes back to that journaling prompt of what are some things that it is time for you to express? What are some children of the mind it's time for you to bring forth, give birth to, and then nurture? What self-care actions would be beneficial for you now? And then do it, because action is really, really important to you. And then as you take these actions, what are your thought processes and your words around it when it's time to go offer this action or do these acts of service? What is your wording around it? Is it need to, must, have to, or is it want to and love to? Oftentimes when we start asking ourselves these questions, some shame comes up because we realize that while we've been taught, we know that the higher way is to love to and to want to, but we really realize that it's been have to, need to, must kind of thoughts and words around it. So pay attention to what you're saying with that. And if you don't love to or want to, exploring the questions, then why am I doing it? If I don't love to and I don't want to, is it out of a sense of duty? Is it out of a sense of obligation? And exploring these things and asking yourself, why doesn't that carry over to me? Why do I keep putting myself second or third or last? Why do I only care for myself after all the other stuff is done? And starting to create a balance. You cannot continue to give to others from an empty vessel. It is vital that you take time to fill your own vessel. So another journaling prompt would be, how am I going to fill my vessel? What fills my soul? So that then those acts of obligation, those things that you should do, the things that come from a place of duty, can become more enjoyable because you're not spending the last bit of energy that you have on that. You've filled your own cup. You've filled your vessel. And then continue to take action. I would be curious to know what your language of affection is. They are normally called love languages. I moved away from that because the way that we love someone doesn't always show up or is received in that way. However, the way that we show and receive affection from others is. So the 5 languages of affection are acts of service. I would be very surprised if this wasn't in your top 2. Words of affirmation. I think that this is another thing that is important to you and that perhaps you have not always received. Gifts, meaning giving and receiving gifts. Spending quality time, and physical touch. So one more time, acts of service, words of affirmation, quality time, gifts, and physical touch. Those are the languages of affection? What are yours, and are you receiving them? You're probably giving to others in those languages. They all have their own language. What is their language? And what is your language? And can you speak? Can you use your voice to express how you want to receive affection? And as you start putting yourself higher on your priority list, this toe is going to start to straighten out. And when it does, then your words and your actions within your own internal self will start to align more closely. You are a very intuitive person. You receive promptings. You receive messages with information that is useful to you, and you have this wide open channel of intuition. Now, when we look at the way that you're thinking, which shows up in your second and your first toes, you sometimes second guess yourself on the way that, on the message that you have received, especially if it goes against or is not in the box that you are in. And everyone's in a box, so that's just how it is. The question is did you create your box, or did someone else create it for you and you just jumped into it? So really pay attention to what are the edges of your box. My feeling is that it is time for you to make yourself a bigger box. If you've ever done planting in containers, that plant fills the pot, fills the container, and it gets root bound and it stops being able to grow. In fact, sometimes it starts to kill the plant because it is root bound in this container. And so what do? We take it out of the container. We rustle up those roots just a little bit so that they can expand out and that the plant can continue to thrive. And we put it in a larger container. Now, it doesn't feel good to this plant at first because we've just put it in a container with new soil. It's a new container. Now, the roots that have been also tightly packed can start to adventure out just a little bit. And that's a great analogy for life. Once we have grown and expanded to a certain amount, we're in this container, and it's time to go through the work and the discomfort that can sometimes occur of uprooting out of the pot or the container that we're in and going into a new one with new soil. So that would be a good journaling prompt. In what ways have you outgrown the container that you're currently in? In what ways are you root bound? And what would it look like to go into a different container with some new soil in it? What would that look like? And if it feels scary, that makes sense because you spent a whole lot of time staying in a container so that everybody else would feel comfortable. So that's one of the biggest messages of your toes is it's time for you. It's time for you to spend a little bit of time every single day, every single week, filling your own vessel and exploring this new container. Oh, right. Let's move on to your relationship toes. So my guess is that your relationships with other people are a source of great comfort, and relationships with others, especially people that you're on a similar frequency with, actually fill your soul. So identify, who are these people? Who, when you're with them, do you leave feeling more energized and inspired about life? And who are the people that drain that energy from you? And then consider what to do with each of these relationships, where to spend one of your major currencies. There are 3 currencies: time, focus, and money. Where are you going to spend your currencies, and with what people? And I invite you to spend it with people that fill your soul, the people that are draining your vessel. It's time this is part of that repotting analogy. That's part of the discomfort. What relationships is it time to change? And what does that change look like? When we look at your relationship with self, again, this extreme flexibility and adaptability, putting yourself last. All of these toes, they're looking to the future. Your action toe, your relationship toe. When toes turn this way towards the little toe, they're looking to the future. You have hope that something better in the future is waiting for you. What if the future is now? And what can you do now to take action for yourself and to know who you are and what your values are? You've lived a lot of your life on a priorities list, and you haven't been your top priority. Everything goes through what I call the decision-making funnel. And at the top of that funnel are our values. And our values are oftentimes not what we think that they are, because we're much more in touch with what our priorities are, because that's how we've been trained to look at priorities: family, livelihood, work, relationships. These may be your values, but they may be your priorities. And then from that comes out your decisions. So here's another analogy. When you were a kid, or when your kids were kids and they'd play in the sandbox, and you would want that really, really beautiful fine sand that didn't have anything in it. So in this analogy, that beautiful fine sand that you've put through the filters, that's your decisions. That's the actions that you're taking. Those are the words that you're saying. That's the way that you're expressing. Okay? Those are your decisions. There are two filters above that. There's one that's fine, like one of those colanders that just has the fine knit mesh on it. And then the other one is like one of those big colanders, like that you'd wash lettuce or something in, or the one that in the sandbox analogy that you're getting the rocks and the sticks and all those things out of. So all the stuff up here, all the sand in the sandbox, this is all the information that is coming to you all the time, all the time, all the time, all the choices, all the possibilities. That's all up in the top of that decision funnel. And then the next one, so that's your values. That's what takes out this value, this value, this value are not my values. So it starts to take out the big chunks. And then it goes through the priorities, which is the finer mesh one. Now, what happens if you put all that stuff in the finer mesh one? It gets clogged. You come to a point of indecision or letting other people make decisions. I hope you're understanding this analogy. I am going to put a screen at the end of this video of the decision funnel that goes through your values, your priorities, and then through what your decisions are, so that you can get a better visual of what I'm talking about. And my guess is that you've bypassed your own values and gone to the priorities your whole life. And it's time to stop that. You've got a whole new chapter awaiting you. When we get to your chart, we're going to talk a little bit more about this, but be prepared right now for you to go into a period of reflection, of introspection, of closure, and being ready for a rebirth of sorts, a time that is going to be different for you. The way that I'm seeing this is a couple of ways. One is the waning crescent, the waning phase of the moon. The moon gets bright, the moon gets dark. And when the moon gets dark, it's a time of introspection, a time of reflection. But I think a better analogy for you is the gardening analogy. Right now, in the specific phase that you're in your astrological life, which goes around just like the phases of the moon and goes through the waxing and the waning phases, just like the seasons. So I'm going to go through the seasons. That's what I'm feeling prompted to do. In spring is when we start to plant the seeds and prepare the soil. But before that, so in January, gardeners start to plan their garden. They start to collect the seeds. They start to plan where they're going to plant things. They start dreaming about the harvest. That's kind of January, February. Come March, we start to plant the seeds and prepare the soil. Anyways, it goes through. You understand this cycle of gardening. After we harvest and give thanks, then we put the mulch and all the things on top of the soil, and we let the soil rest. And that time of rest is nourishing the soil. That time of rest is preparing the soil for when you plant the seeds again in the spring. Right now, you are at a time of the waning crescent of the moon, or the time where you've harvested, you've put the mulch on top of the soil, and now you're going to allow nourishment to come into the soil. Or in this case, allow nourishment to come to you. Be open to receiving love and service from others. This might be a mind shift for you because you're so used to taking action. What if you allowed people to serve you and for you to receive that? That's what this phase of your life is right now, is a time of receiving. Of course, you can still give. That's part of your nature. And that is a cycle. So allow yourself to receive on the other end of the cycle, in your relationships specifically. And understand what your values are. Really dig deep into what your values are. That's certainly something, if you are interested, that I can help you with. I have an entire process that I help people go through to understand what their values are and release any shame about if those values don't line up with your priorities, or if your top value isn't what you've been told it should be. Whew, that was a lot. Take that in, take notes. You have access to this video for a lifetime. And I really invite you to journal about and talk about with close people what your insights are as you listen to this. All right. One of the big things, and I promise I'm coming back to these toes right here, because I'm really saving the top two messages for last. And that is your last toe and your first toe. So these pinky toes, honestly, these are rare pinky toes. And this pinky toe is straight. You've got a nice nail on it, and it's not turned to the side. It's largely turned to the top. This one's looking a little bit off to the future, like these other toes. It's just tracking with these other toes. In fact, all of these toes, I can't see this one, but I'm guessing that underneath that Band-Aid, it also points towards the future. In this toe, these are your trust and your prosperity toes. So I'd be really interested in actually having a conversation with you about what your relationship with trust and prosperity has been in your life. You do trust yourself. Do you see how this little toe, this trust toe, is almost the same length as your relationship toe? You trust yourself to do the right thing. You trust yourself to take the appropriate action, especially as it pertains to others. I invite you to trust yourself to know that you will also take care of yourself at a very deep and nurturing level, and explore what that looks like. And then here, you are an optimistic person. That is an inherent gift that you have, and you know that you're strong, so you do tend to trust. You've been burned a few times, and you have this hope and this optimism that keeps you coming back. So the question here is are there What are the relationships? And by relationship, I don't just mean with people. I mean with all things. I mean with your relationship with life. Making a list of where your trust has been, what's the word? Where your trust has gone through the cycle of giving and receiving. So you've received because of your trust. And what are the people, situations, and experiences that have what's the word? That have not been respectful of your trust, and having a look at those. Another message that is coming to me is stop making excuses for people. You know a lot, and you are a very compassionate person. And that is such a beautiful gift. Continue with that. That shows up here in these two toes especially. There it is. Looking at those things that relationship of trust has gone full cycle in giving and receiving, and in what ones has it not. And stop making excuses for people who don't respect your trust. You're right. They've got this and this and this and this. They've got all of these things that has put them in a position where they are not a person to be trusted. But that doesn't mean you've got to make excuses for it. Acknowledging it, seeing it, understanding that, yeah, they had a different starting line than you. One's not better, one's not worse. We all have exactly what is right for us. But you don't need to make excuses for them, nor do you need to continue to give your trust to them simply because you're strong and because you understand. Compassion doesn't equal trust. Compassion is compassion. And compassion is a strong word that keeps coming up when I look at your toes. You really do have a gift for compassion. And I invite you to extend that compassion to yourself also and release shame. Forgive yourself for not knowing what you didn't know. And enjoy the beautiful gift that trust and prosperity is. There's another for journaling prompt is, what does prosperity mean to you? A lot of times we think of prosperity as being financial. But prosperity is also an abundance of relationships that are beautiful relationships. Prosperity can be health. Prosperity can be opportunity. Prosperity can be an expansive mind. So what does prosperity look like to you? And go ahead and journal on that. When we look at your big toes here, this is your life path and this is your spirit path. Thank you for your patience as I clear my throat on this. The energy is already moving strongly from the awareness that is happening in your subconscious, in your soul, around some of these things that we've discussed. All right, your life path and your spirit path. Do you see how both of these are leaning into the future? Both of them come up and bend over. The other thing that is interesting is it goes straight, straight, straight. And then at the halfway point in your life, they started going this way. All right. Halfway being approximate. Is there a specific age that you remember that you stopped going on your path and started going on another path? A path of shoulds, a path of perception, a path that other people said was the right path for you. At what point did that happen? Not important to know, but could be interesting. And what I would recommend with this toe is to take some of your fingers and just press here, pressing this way, pressing towards the midline. And right here, pressing inward toward the pinky toe. So you're really just inviting the energy to shift and open up. As you do that, you are going to open up your intuition. You are going to open up your leadership abilities. And most importantly, you're going to become more aligned with your life path in this second half of your life, in this second part where you get to have children of the mind. That is one of the words that just keeps coming to me over and over, the children of the mind. So I invite you to do that with that toe. And the same thing with this toe. This is your spirit path. When did you become aware of the obligation, the shoulds, and the duty? And how do you feel about that? And inviting you again to open that up. When you do, your intuition, your channel of intuition is going to expand. This is when we get to move into the wise woman, the sage area of our life. You have tremendous gifts of intuition. And when you move out of the shoulds, the needs, the have tos, the obligation, the duty energy, that intuition is going to open up, and the visions that you're going to receive are going to be amazing. And it's really going to open up massive possibilities in this part of your life, especially as you nurture yourself. So ideally, what I would love to see is for all of these toes to track straight, like your action toe, like your relationship toe, like your prosperity toe on this foot. So the ones to focus on especially are your communication toe and your life path toe. And then on this foot, having these tracks straight so that you are taking time for this relationship for yourself, taking action for yourself and not putting yourself last, communicating what you want to receive in the language of affection, and having some of these conversations that might seem hard, but will be life-changing. And then exploring what is it like in a different container. And that doesn't mean you have to like go and completely switch containers. It's expanding within the container that you already have. Like the analogy only goes so far. In our lives, we're not transplanting ourselves unless we want to, unless that's what we're being called to do. So much of the time, it's just expanding within the container that we already have. If that works for you, expanding within it. So there's another journal prompt. What does it look like to expand within the container that I have? And that's going to give you more inspiration for perhaps exploring outside of that container or becoming a beacon within that container. We're now going to look at your birth chart as it pertains to your toes here. So just a couple of points that I'm really seeing super strong. You are incredibly intelligent and intuitive. My guess is that when you go into a room, you're already 20 steps ahead. Your mind moves fast. You might not, it might be what's going on in the center of your mind, and it might not get out through your communication, which may have been a serious place of frustration for you when we look at these communication toes, because your mind showing up here in Aquarius and in Gemini through your rising sign and your midheaven sign. If you don't speak the language of astrology, don't worry about it. If you do, the midheaven and your ascendant is your midheaven is where you are, the direction that you are headed in this life. You don't like, it's just, you're going to naturally go in this way. And it goes towards Aquarius, which is highly intellectual, which is very quick, and which also is very unique. It is likely that the uniqueness of your path has felt scary to you. Your ascendant, your rising sign, is how you experience the world and how people experience you. And that is in the sign of Gemini, which is very quick thinking. And Gemini and Aquarius, they get along. They get along very well here. Those two signs get along. So understanding that you are quick thinking. Now, what's interesting is your Mercury here, which is your communication. Mercury is the planet that rules these second toes. It's in the sign of Taurus. Taurus is deliberate. Taurus craves stability. Taurus is a little bit slow. And by slow, I mean Taurus likes to take its time. Taurus likes to think about things. And so this is why, even though you might be 20 steps ahead in your brain, communicating that and getting that out may not be something that you felt particularly confident and competent in. That's your second toes here. Now, here's what's interesting. Your moon is also here in Taurus. Your moon represents your emotional self. Your moon is your non-negotiable needs. It is imperative for you to take time. Creature comforts are important to you. Good tasting food, a soft bed, comfortable clothing. These are things that are important to you. And you may have been told that that's not okay. Or, my favorite one growing up was, what about all the starving kids? And then, name the continent. So the idea that these earthly pleasures, so to speak, were somehow not important, even evil, probably some shame around that, which might be what's showing up here in your life and spirit path toes. Now, what's interesting is very close here, you have the Black Moon Lilith. Lilith is our shadow side. And so there may have been some shame. I'm going to restate that. There has been shame around some of these things. Frustration that you couldn't get your ideas out and communicate the way that you desired because you didn't feel safe, or because that information was kind of in the middle of your head, and just getting it out through your voice felt a little bit difficult. The Dark Moon Lilith in Taurus can also show up as passive-aggressive behavior and manipulation. Those are not easy things to explore in ourselves, but I invite you to explore them. How have those things shown up for you? Now, your sun here in Aries. Aries and Mars are the rulers of these third toes, your action toes. You're an action taker. And with your Mars here in Virgo, it is retrograde. So sometimes some of the way you take action is a little bit different, and really cannot be contained in a box. So all these shoulds, coulds, or shoulds, have tos, musts, like that might just not work for you. But having structured systems is important for you. And the good news is you can create them or you can modify them. Some template that somebody set out about how to do something may not work for you. You may want to adjust it to your own unique way. With your sun in Aries, you are fiery, you take action, and this actually has something to do with potential for manipulation and passive-aggressive behavior with your moon and the Black Moon Lilith here in the sign of Taurus. Your North Node is here in Aries, and Aries learns things from Taurus and from Pisces. And the lesson to learn here is to have patience for yourself, to expand spiritually, and to take time and joy in some of these comforts that you may have had a niggling of guilt about enjoying too much, just a little bit of shame about. It's time to release that shame. Let's look at Venus here. Venus is here at 11 degrees of Pisces. Your relationships are really a doorway for everything in your life, which is clear in this beautiful straight relationship toe here. Your relationship with self may have felt nebulous, may have felt like you're trying to grab air. And it's time to settle into you and who you are, and to develop the relationship with yourself as a sovereign human being. Or did you have entrepreneurial pursuits that you have been interested in, that perhaps those are some of the things that you've put on the shelf? And if so, what are they, and what's holding you back from doing them? That would be a good journaling question. Or is there a book that you want to write? That would be a good journaling question. Even if nobody ever reads it, even if it's never published, is there a book that you want to write? Has your shame around your emotional needs challenged your mental health? That's another journaling question that would be a powerful one. Have you become rigid in a set of beliefs and paradigms? And that's part of this container that has you root bound. And what would it look like to expand that container? What really rigid beliefs is it time to see for what it is? And that is a belief that may or may not have served you at one time, likely was imposed upon you from someone else. Perhaps you saw evidence of it being true at one time, and so you grasped onto it, and yet current evidence is saying, let's have another look at this. We have the paradigm culturally and as humans that we want to be consistent, and that changing things, especially our beliefs, is dangerous. And so we hang on to them, even if it's no longer true. For example, if you have a belief, because of your chart, I'm going to throw out a belief that you may or may not have, but feels neutral to me, because I want to have this be neutral so that you can extrapolate and apply it to your own little touch points that might be a little bit tender. At one time, culturally, in the United States of America, there was the belief that going to college and getting an education was really the only way you were really going to be able to, accomplish the American dream and get the house and everything. You may or may not have believed that. Again, this is an analogy because I want you to get from this analogy and apply it to you. You are certainly intelligent and can do this very well. So what's coming up for you when I talk about this rigid belief? Well, there are still people in our culture that continue to hang on to that belief that getting a college education is the best way, and in some cases, the only way to get ahead in this life, to get that good job, to make the money, to have the house. Even though we have lots of evidence that that is not true anymore. It may have been true at one time, but it is not true anymore. There are lots of people that are experiencing successful businesses, prosperous in the form of money lives, who did not get a college education. Okay, so forget about if that is one of your beliefs or not. It's a cultural belief. And how does that apply to you? I'm imagining that it has not been safe for you to be the fiery person that you are. Is it time for you to let that fiery part show? And remember, fire isn't shy. Fire doesn't go like sneak around the corner. Fire doesn't manipulate. Fire isn't passive aggressive. Fire is just fire. And your sun, your fire here, is wanting to be seen. You actually have quite a bit of fire, and this is an area of transformation in your life. That's another powerful message from this reading, is being seen for the fiery woman that you are is part of your destiny in this lifetime, and it is not comfortable. And it's time. If you haven't started to do this already, it's time. This fiery toe here, it is raring to go. And I would be very curious to see if you choose to do the journaling activities, to do the light massage and manual manipulation of your toes. I would be very curious to see your toes in 8 weeks' time. The energy is already starting to shift. The question is will you receive it, or will you push against it because it feels uncomfortable, because it feels different, because it's asking you to question the container that you are in? I'm available for questions should you have any. The person who gifted this to you can put you in contact with me if that is what you desire. And I appreciate the honor, blessing, and opportunity that it has been to read your toes and to read your chart. Merry Christmas.